Hello, everybody. We're back to post it. And I left you at a big cliffhanger, not just because the book is great, but because my computer died. So Mrs. Pearson is learning a lesson in charging her computer. All right, so I'm going to back up just a little bit because I don't remember exactly where it died. So a vote was taken. The majority ruled. The students got no say. A new school policy was written into the student code book. No more phones, period. Not in lockers, not in pockets, not in backpacks. They were to stay at home. If you absolutely had to bring one for emergency reasons or for use after school, it would be turned in at the office at the start of the day, placed in a labeled Ziploc baggie, and kept there until the final bell. If your parents called to tell you that your Aunt Tilda poked herself in the eye with her own toothbrush, the secretary would take a message and have you called down to the office. Principal Whittingham couldn't control what was said and done off school grounds, but while we were inside the cinder block walls of the middle school, there would be no texting, calling, posting, playing, or surfing. We were there to learn. Case closed. A few parents protested, complained that their kids had a right to keep their electronic devices on them at all times. The administration reminded them that there is nothing in the U.S. Constitution specifically governing the individual rights of cell phone carrying minors. Having a phone was a privilege, and one that the students at Branton Middle School had finally lost. When the vote was passed, Mr. Jackson looked like a cat that had just ate a 300-pound canary. Ruby just stared at her shoes. They were white chucks with red letters to match the color in her cheeks. Everyone blamed her, of course. Of course, it could just as easily have been them who had gotten caught. Afterward, they went online telling her thanks for ruining our lives and that she should find a tornado and get sucked back to Oz. A couple more eloquent students posted long messages directed at administration and asked them to reconsider. The Falcon County Gazette published 2 pages worth of articles in the Sunday electoral section, mostly in favor of the new rule. Everyone had to get all their online complaining out before Monday, when the new school's policy would take effect, and then we would all be disconnected for good. The new rules were clearly posted on 2 different signs on the way in and several more scattered throughout the halls, informing students that any phones or tablets found in a student's possession would be confiscated immediately and the student would receive a warning. If it happened again, it was an automatic 1-day suspension. After that, it got even worse. By the end of the week, 17 kids had been suspended. The administration was in full crackdown. Miss Shears looked like a sniper sitting at her desk. Not that it mattered to me, of course, because of the budget and all. Bench and Wolf both had phones, but Bench just used his to call his father for a ride after practice, and Wolf mainly used his to listen to music. The only one of us who was heartbroken was Dee Dee. He was a member of several online gaming communities and even contributed to a blog called The Dungeon Depths. That first day, I could tell he was getting twitchy, and he certainly wasn't the only one. There was a mob at the front office when the last bell rang, kids pouring out of their classrooms, swarming like hornets. A few kids were knocked over. As soon as students got their phones back, you could see them turtle, faces suctioned to screens. Dee Dee cradled his and called it precious, though not loud enough for anybody but me to hear. The bus ride home that Monday was church service quiet. Everyone desperate to catch up on what they missed, even though they hadn't missed anything because none of their friends had their phones either. I finished up my math homework while Bench surfed next to me, telling a whole bunch of junk that I couldn't care about. I heard the kid in the seat behind us mumble something about how unfair this was. I can't imagine going an entire year like this, she said. It was clear from the start that this no phone thing was going to be a problem. The students of BMS would have to find some way to fill the void, some way to stay connected. I just didn't know that something would come about so quickly, or that we would be the ones to start it. Screenless, I looked out at the window at the flash of trees, and I felt Bench's elbow in my side. "Check this out," he said. He showed me a picture of somebody who had already posted Principal Whittingham's face pasted onto Darth Vader's body, crushing a Photoshop phone in his hand, and it said, "Behold the power of the dark side." I nodded and smiled. Then I went back to watching the trees. This bus, was where it all started, at least for me. This is where I met Bench. It was the last week of August. 6th grade was well underway, and I had made 0 progress finding my people, despite my mother's promise. I'd eaten lunches by myself, spent classes sitting in the back, walked the halls trying not to accidentally brush up against anyone. I told myself I was just feeling everybody out and getting a sense of the place, but the truth was I felt cut off, stuck behind an invisible wall. Life sucked. Middle school sucked, and I was pretty sure I was destined to spend the next 3 years miserable and alone. Then one day a boy stepped in. black hair buzzed, nearly bald, wearing a Calvin Johnson jersey and expensive-looking high tops, slapping his hands on the back of every seat he passed as if he were marking his territory. I hadn't seen him before. I stuffed my nose back into my book. Reading was the easiest way to avoid making eye contact. I waited for him to go by. He shuffled past, and then he stopped, turned around, and plopped down in the seat next to me. You saving this? I nodded, and then I shook my head, then tucked my feet back a little bit so he couldn't see the cheap shoes I was wearing. Saving it. Funny, like there was a long waiting list of people that wanted to sit next to me. The bus rumbled on. The boy rubbed his head and smiled. He had a really big smile, like a count all the teeth kind of smile. Cool hat, he said, pointing to the Detroit ball cap I wore every day to school. Thanks, I mumbled. I made a point of turning the page in my book, even though I hadn't even bothered to read it yet. Do you like the Tigers? The boy asked. It was my dad's, I explained. He gave it to me. He used to like them, and now he likes the Marlins. Dad kept threatening to take me to a game in Miami the next time I came to visit, even though I really don't like baseball and probably couldn't name more than 10 teams, including the Tigers and Marlins. The boy looked offended. What? You got to be kidding me. The Marlins are terrible, he said with the conviction of a holy man. I mean, they got like Stanton and Alvarez, but for the most part, they suck big old donkey turds through a straw. Yeah, I said. I wasn't sure why anyone would suck donkey turds or even if it would fit into a straw, but I could appreciate a good image when I heard one. Honestly, I just wear it because he gave it to me. Nah, that's cool, the boy said. I didn't mean anything bad about your dad or anything. You know, just the Marlins? He shook his head. Throw a tiger into a baby pool with the fish and see who comes up on top. That's all I'm saying. Well, they're pretty big fish, I said. I'm not even sure they'd fit in a baby pool. My father sent me a picture of an actual marlin he caught on a chartered fishing trip the first year down there. It was almost as big as he was. They're fast, too, and they have swords for noses. I suddenly realized how nerdy I sounded, so I shut up. Swords for noses? The boy raised his eyebrows. Man, that has to be awkward. I didn't know what he meant, this strange kid who sat down next to me and started talking about donkeys and tigers for no reason, so I just stared at him. I mean, how are they ever going to kiss another fish without stabbing him in the face? He asked. He smiled all his teeth again, and I snorted. I couldn't help it, just picturing two marlins trying to make out while giving each other stabs in the face. Yeah, I guess I never thought about that. Well, they'd be like poking each other's eyes out and stuff. Yeah, right. I mean, not that fish kiss. No, of course not. Although they do have big lips. And then the boy made a fishy kiss face by pressing his cheeks and working his lips up and down. He went cross-eyed in the process. It was pretty hilarious. You kind of laugh like a donkey, he said to me. I stopped laughing. I realized it had been a really long time since I laughed in front of anybody other than my mother. She always said she loved my laugh, but maybe she was required to. It's cool, the boy said. Could be worse. My dad farts every time he laughs too loud. That's why nobody makes any jokes at dinner. He raised his eyebrows again to let me know he was dead serious. Then he stuck out his fist. I'm JJ, he said. Eric, I said, receiving the first fist bump of my middle school career. But most people call me Frost. Actually, most people didn't call me anything. But when they did, they called me Frost. Frost, huh? How'd you get that name? I told him it was a long story, even though it wasn't. But we were already pulling into the school parking lot. I'll have to tell you some other time. The boy named JJ shrugged. Hey, what period do you have lunch? He asked me. And that was all it took. A fish face and a fist bump, and suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. I had JJ, soon to become Bench. He lived within walking distance of my house. He liked video games. He had a trampoline in his backyard. More importantly, he filled that empty seat next to me on the bus, and he made me laugh. It was just the two of us for a while. We didn't complete the tribe until a 6th grade fall field trip to Nuwago State Park, the teachers trying to squeeze in some appreciation for Mother Nature before the winter bit us in the butt. We ate lunch in the grass and then set out on a 2-mile trail. 98 6th graders following teachers like waddling ducks, but Bench and I wandered off into the woods and got separated from everyone else. And by the time we found our way back to the trail, the herd had moved on. So we set out on our own, keeping our ears perked for barking teachers until we ran into 2 other kids who were just as lost as we were. They introduced themselves as Advic and Morgan. We introduced ourselves as JJ and Frost. We agreed to stick together, working along the trails until we found the rest of the class. It only took 30 minutes, but in that 30 minutes, and in the 10 more of yelling from Principal Whittingham that followed, we clicked. We snapped together like Legos. I'm still not sure what it was about that day, that trip, and that moment. Maybe it was the 4 of us daring each other to pee in the river, or Bench climbing a tree and getting his undies snagged on a branch, or Dee claiming to have found a print in the mud that he swore came from a velociraptor. Maybe we all just subconsciously realized there was strength in numbers and that 4 was better than 2 plus 2. We rode the bus together that afternoon, talking the whole way back to school about everything. Our favorite bands, lame movies, best video games, lousy parents, worst teachers, the smell on the bus, which smelled like gasoline, damp leaves, and sweat. The odd fact that we never talked to each other before, even though we had a few classes together. How strange it was for all of us to get lost at the same time, just to run into each other in the woods like that. How Dee Dee's farts sound like a dying baby elephant. How Principal Winningham looked like when he was going to pop when he found the four of us had wandered off on our own. And how none of us had ever really liked our first names. I remember laughing hysterically and eating most of Dee Dee's goldfish crackers, and for the first time in forever, I finally felt like I was part of something. The next day at lunch, we found each other and we picked up where we left off. Mom was right. You make your tribe. Sometimes I hate it when she's right, but not that time. Looking back on it, I think it had something to do with getting lost in the woods. Otherwise, we might have just gone on ignoring each other. I don't want to make it sound like it was a big, gooey, sappy thing. We didn't share the same pair of traveling pants or promise over spit shakes to be BFFs. We just kind of glommed together. And we managed to stay that way for 2 whole years, just the four of us, pretty much perfect. Then she came along, and the war started, and everything came unglued. And we're going to stop there. See you next time.